Hello everybody and welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be taking a look at the Ultimate Hanzo Guide where I'm going to explain everything you need to make yourself a better Hanzo. So let's keep this short and sweet and let's get right into the video. Alright, so to start things off, we're going to talk about Hanzo's kit. And when I say kit, I mean any of his abilities, that includes passives. Now to start off, I want to talk about his wall climb first. Now I think this is probably one of the strongest items available to Hanzo. Now with the wall climb, what it allows us to do is get to higher places so we can shoot down on our enemies as well as escape, and offers just a ton of mobility all around the map. It is an amazing perk that usually isn't used that often by novice players. So let's break it down what the wall climb actually does and how you can use it to its maximum potential. So the maximum range of the wall climb is a 4-meter vertical climb. So you can go up 4 meters before you fall off. Now, one of the best things about the wall climb is that it doesn't have a cooldown. So, say you fall off, you can climb right back up to the spot you were just at. There's no cooldown, nothing like that. Now, another way to kind of gauge how long you can wall climb for, you can wall climb for about 1 second. Now, I know 1 second seems really short, but you can actually get pretty high. As you'll see right now, I actually took the time to mark out how far you can climb on a wall and made some really cool visuals so you guys kind of visualize it more so you can see like, oh, I can climb to that in game. So the wall climb is a great ability, especially when you pair it with Hanzo's double jump. Now Hanzo has a lunge where he can jump and then he can change direction mid-air with a second jump. And the maximum range, so if you were to jump and then jump forward again, you can go just shy of 8 meters. Now this ability does have a cooldown, has about a 5-second cooldown, but it can be used in tandem with the wall climb. And when they're used together, you can get to some really cool spots that no other characters can get to. And overall, it's just a huge part of his kit. The lunge has a ton of versatility. Hanzo is a mid-range player, and the lunge allows you to keep your enemies in that mid-range. So if somebody's rushing you, you can use your lunge to get back. Or if they're running away, you can use your lunge to keep up with them. It's overall, you should be using your lunge pretty often, not on cooldown, but whenever you really need the chance to, and you'll like understand that more in the game as it comes along. Now cooldowns, it does have a pretty short cooldown, around 5 seconds, but this is a huge part of his kit, and using those together is super important. Alright, so next up in Hanzo's kit is actually going to be the weapon that he uses, which is called the Storm Bow. Now the Storm Bow is, I think, a very good weapon. It can be very tricky to use, and it's definitely a more skilled weapon to use in Overwatch 2. Now a few things about the Storm Bow. Depending on how long you pull it back, it will have a projectile speed difference and a damage difference. So the longer you hold fire and the longer Hanzo pulls the bow back, the more damage it's going to do, and the faster it's going to fly through the air. You're going to have less drop, it's going to move farther, and it's going to hit for more damage. Now say you're going to pull the bow back to its maximum length, it's going to take about 0.7 seconds, and it will hit for a 250 HP headshot. Now, that's great because that can one-shot almost every single DPS in the game, and almost every single healer in the game. So if you can hit headshots on DPSs and healers, they will die if you're holding it back full length. And now a lot of tanks can be 2-shot or 3-shot with full powered headshots. The bow is super strong. Now it does require some practice to use it. It's definitely not a super easy weapon to use, but it is definitely worth mastering the bow so you can become, the next great Overwatch player that you want to be. So next up in Hanzo's kit, we're going to talk about Sonic Arrow. Now this is a skill or an ability that people don't use very often, and they should be. Sonic Arrow, basically what it does, it literally gives you wall hacks for free. You don't have to install a hacking client, become a cheater, and get banned. Just play Hanzo. Just shoot his arrow every 12 seconds, and you'll have wall hacks for almost the entire game. It is amazing. It's one of his best skills that no one uses. And not only does it give you wall hacks, but it gives your whole team wall hacks. So how it works is it has a duration of 6 seconds, and it has a cooldown of 12 seconds. So basically 50% of the time it's going to be active. Now, the area effect is about 9 meters, it's really, really large actually. The 9 meters, you can cover pretty much any choke point, any hallway, any place that the enemy's going to be coming through. And that's where I like to use it. I like to put it, in a choke point or right before a choke point that we're holding so I can see, who's coming through that choke point. Or if no one's coming, then we know they're trying to go around from the side. Now another situation you can use it in is putting it in one of those side routes next to a choke point to see, oh hey, you know, they're trying to flank right now. You can use it to cover your flank. You can use it, it's very versatile. I personally like to keep it on the enemy as much as possible because I feel like it helps my team more. They're gonna know, you know, who's peeking, you know, especially if you have like a Widow who keeps jiggle peeking around a corner, you know, peeking out, shooting and going back. If you launch a sonic arrow up there, you know when they're gonna peek and you can just line a headshot up there, and as soon as they step out, you've got them. It's a great way to deal with a ton of different enemies in the game. Super effective. Your team will like you a lot more if you're using it more often, and I would highly recommend everybody use it, please. All right, and finally for Hanzo's kit, we're going to be talking about storm arrows. Now this is one of the harder things to use in his kit effectively. They have a bunch of different uses, and they're hard to kind of pinpoint what to do with them. So they have a damage of 65 to the head. They do 65 every single time. They won't do any more, any less. And you don't have to worry about pulling them back. They instantly automatically pull back, and they will fire rapid fire. You'll fire 5 shots very fast. It's about 1 shot for every 0.2 seconds. They fly a little bit slower than normal arrows at 110 meters per second, but right up there with the super fast arrows. And it lasts for up to 5 seconds. Now, it's going to depend on how fast you use those 5 arrows. And it has a cooldown of every 10 seconds. Now, this is an ability that I would highly recommend using it on cooldown every single time. It doesn't matter who you're facing. There's maybe a few situations where you could want to keep them, but overall, I would recommend using them on cooldown pretty close to every time they come up. Now, these are great for tanks because as a tank's rushing you, you know, Hanzo's pretty weak, 200 health character. He's not going to stand a chance against a tank face to face. So what you can do is use your lunge to get space between the tank, and then use storm arrows to do enough damage to make that tank back up to a healer. Because if you're on a tank and you hit headshots with all 5 storm arrows, you can do pretty close to about 300 to 350 damage on a tank, depending on what type of armor they have. And that's really strong. That's going to take almost 3/4 to a half, depending on what tank it is, of their health away. Now, most tanks are going to back up from that because they're now they're in 1-shot killable range from the team, and they need to back up and get healing. So a lot of times storm arrows can be used to save your life, especially against tanks, but they're super useful if you're getting rushed close range, because storm arrows, what they allow to do, they might do a little bit less damage than a fully charged arrow, but they allow you to pull back your bow instantly. So say a Genji's on top of you, dashing through you. You probably don't have time to do a full pullback on your bow to try and one-shot him. But what you can do is tap storm arrows, and you instantly have 5 arrows instantly knocked in your bow, ready to shoot at the Genji. Now, a lot of times this can save your life, and you can get a kill on the Genji if you play it right. So storm arrows, super useful. Definitely need to practice with them a little bit. They shoot a little bit different than the normal arrows in the way that how you have to pre-aim them compared to normal arrows. But it's definitely doable and definitely worth using. So with that, we're going to get to our next section. See you there. Alright, so in the second section, we're going to talk about the Hanzo playstyle, you know, where you should be playing on the map, how aggressive you're going to be, you know, kind of the Hanzo mindset as you're playing the game. And as far as positioning goes, you kind of have to flex 2 positions at once to be an effective Hanzo, I believe. Now, this is of course just my opinion. Some people might view it differently. In my experience, the best way to play Hanzo is a mix between the passive sharpshooter behind your tank up on high ground, and also flexing when the opportunity arises, an aggressive short flank style player. So how I like to start the game is to find high ground, you know, whether we're defending or attacking, find a high ground and see if I can take out the enemy's backline. So I'm mainly gunning for their healers, but say they have, you know, a sharpshooter that's, you know, a soldier's after me, you know, some hit scans after me up on the high ground. I'm going to focus them first, and then I'm going to go back to their healers. As Hanzo, I'm not going to focus the tank unless we're not getting enough damage on tanks. So say our tank, our supports, and the other damage, you know, maybe they can't get through that tank. Maybe, you know, it's a really good, you know, Orisa that just doesn't seem to be able to die. You know, so after you take out, you know, a healer or 2, you do need to focus the tank and get that tank down. I would highly recommend trying to get a healer out first. That will make it much easier. But that's how I like to start the game, is just kind of pick off their backline until they start to get wary, because eventually they're not going to let you pick off the backline the whole game, especially as you get higher in rank. They're going to start to move their positioning, maybe, stick a little bit closer to the tanks. If someone's going to come after you, they might switch to, a Pharah or a Genji, maybe a Tracer, and they're going to come after you because they don't want you taking out their backline like that. That's going to leave them vulnerable. So that's when you kind of have to start switching your playstyle. You kind of have to start rotating between two playstyles. So when they start switching to, maybe a Pharah or a Genji or a Tracer like that, what I like to do is look for small little flanks I can do on their healers, because their Genji is going to be looking for me up high. So what I can do is take a small flank to their healer, or the other DPS on their team, whatever they're doing, whoever's available really for a kill, and I can use some of my cooldowns and get an easy kill, and then use my passives to get a really easy escape. Because of the wall climb and the dash, it's very easy to get out as a Hanzo and survive. And after you do that for a while, they're going to kind of switch up, because they don't know whether to, stay as, a Pharah or a Genji, or if they need to switch to protect their healers. They don't know what to do, because you're doing both, and it kind of throws them for a loop, and it feels like there's nothing they can do. Now, one of the best things to do is really practice on hitting, the Pharah, Genji, Tracer, because those are your counters. And if you're very good at taking out all three of them, you're pretty much unstoppable as a Hanzo. So that would be my advice on positioning, is try and flex between the two. It's going to take time to get used to it. And a lot of times, when you're first starting out, when you're doing that more aggressive push to try and take out like a healer on kind of like an assassination route, you're probably going to die, because you're going to, take a bad flank. You're going to give your position away before you actually get there, something like that. It's going to happen. It's going to take time to get used to it and kind of figure it out. Now, another great reason to flank is your ult. Your ult is very telegraphed as a Hanzo. So with how he screams in the bow pullback, it actually takes a while to get to the target. And if you don't use it in the right spot, it can be very easy to avoid, and it can be a wasted ult. Now, one good thing about his ult, though, is it's very fast recharging. You can get 4 to 5 ults in a game if you're performing well. And a really good way to use his ult, obviously, is in a tight controlled space where they can't really escape, at a really good choke point or something like that. But the best way I found to use his ult is at a choke point, but from behind. So doing a short flank, get behind him a little bit. And with Hanzo's ult, don't think about trying to take out the whole team. If the opportunity arises where you can get everybody in it, great, use it. But how I like to look at Hanzo's ult is as an assassination tool. If I can take out a healer and a DPS, that's a huge win. Because if we take out a healer and a DPS, we're going to win that fight. And we're going to move on. We're going to move the robot. We're going to move the payload. We're going to take that point, whatever the fight is. We take out a healer and DPS, we win that fight. So that's how I kind of like to look at his ult, is use it as a tool. His ult's not going to kill a tank. Tanks are tanky enough that they have time, even being directly in it, to move out of it. And they might take half damage, but they're not going to die to it. But a healer, especially like a Mercy or something like that has below 200 health, can kill almost instantly. So Hanzo's ult, think of it more like an assassination tool, and I would really recommend, maybe trying to go for a little flank before you do it. But also, one thing with Hanzo's ult is don't let it sit at 100%. His ult charges so fast, even, if you only get 1 kill with his ult, it's worth it to use it, get 1 kill, and then start recharging it. Do not save his ults. There's no point. You get so many during the game. You're going to regret it if you save it. So that is going to be the end of section 2. It's a little bit shorter, but just a little bit overview of positioning. And if you guys really wanted a more detailed guide on positioning, leave it down in the comments below. I can make a whole video about Hanzo positioning. So with that, let's move on into section 3. Alright, so for section 3, I'm going to be talking about aim training. I'm going to show you guys what I do to improve my aim, because as a Hanzo, you have to have a very good aim to be good in the game. You have to be able to get those one shots, do high damage on tanks, and it requires a lot of practice. So the best way I have found to warm up and practice at the same time is using a custom game. Now, I didn't create this custom game. I found this on the workshop map, but you can see the code in front on the screen, and I'll put the code down in the description so you guys can just type in that code. All the settings are there. It's very easy. Now, this has a bunch of different settings that you can change. I like to keep it on the normal setting because as a Hanzo, it's very hard even on normal. If you're a really good Hanzo, you can bump it up to hard or even like extremely hard. But for most people, I'm guessing you're gonna have to bump it down to easy or very easy. Because as a Hanzo, the bots in this game have a pretty erratic movement. which is very good for practicing because honestly, in my experience, most people in the game are easier to hit than these bots. Because most people in the game kind of autopilot, you know, left, right, and they get a pattern going. And it's pretty easy to spot that pattern and take them out. But the bots in the game, they do not. They have a pretty hard pattern to follow. It's very complex. And there's a bunch of different enemy types you can practice with. So I don't really focus on the tanks in this mode. I just kind of let them do their thing out in the nowhere land. I'm focusing on the players like Genji, Tracer, you know, Mercy's a big one. If you're very good at hitting Mercies, you can completely shut down and force them to switch off Mercy, which can be a huge win for your team. But Mercy's very hard to hit. She's a very unique move pattern, a very flowy pattern that also can accelerate very fast and get out of places. So it's very hard to hit a Mercy. She has a lot of versatility in the air. Now, another thing I would practice is in that custom game, there's also Pharahs and Echoes. And I would spend a decent amount of your time in there. You know, maybe if you warm up for 15 minutes, spend 5 minutes focusing on that Echo and that Pharah. Because those are going to be the characters that people pull out first to counter you. You know, say you're on Hanzo, you're popping off, you're destroying their team, they can't do anything. They're going to switch to Pharah or Echo. Those are the hardest two characters that hit. They basically, if you don't practice them, you're not going to be able to kill them. And even if you do practice, honestly, a good Pharah is very hard to beat. You might have to switch off Hanzo, or you might have to change your playstyle, like I was saying, switch to more aggressive ground-based. But that's what I would recommend. Now, another thing that I've started doing recently that has really improved is not using my mouse as much when playing Hanzo to aim. What I've started to do is I've been watching, you know, how pro players aim and how, like, the best Hanzos in the world aim. And they don't necessarily use their mouse to flick as much as they use their W, A, S, and D keys. Or if you're on controller, it'd be your left stick. So what they do is they kind of get their crosshairs situated in a way that if they were to release the arrow, it would likely hit the person generally in the head. And then what they'll do is they'll use their W, A, S, and D keys to kind of match their movement and predict where they're going to be without using their mouse. And I found it's a lot more consistent. You know, especially as someone's peeking around a corner or like moving across the street, instead of trying to follow them with your mouse, just use your mouse to hit the crosshair where it's right at the head height to hit them with an arrow. And then use, you know, your strafe left and right to match their strafe, and it's much easier to aim. Now it's a more advanced aiming type, and it's a lot harder to actually do than it sounds. But I would recommend at least trying it out, practicing it. You know, in the future, I'm probably going to release a full video only on that aiming type as I get better with it. I don't feel comfortable doing a video on it yet as I have not fully mastered it yet. But in the near future, hopefully as I master it, I will release a full video dedicated to the WSD aiming style of Hanzo. And that's going to be my biggest tip for aim training is just, you know, try it out. You know, spend the time in it. You know, when you're warming up in here, don't be listening to music or anything like that or kind of, you know, off in your own world watching TV. Focus on actually trying to get those headshots. Really try to practice. Don't just stand still in the arena. Move around, use your jumps, you know, jump off a wall and try and hit people. You know, do like stuff that you're going to try and mimic in-game. Now that's going to wrap up section 3. That's going to wrap up this video for how you can improve your Hanzo in the Ultimate Hanzo Guide. Now I do plan on doing an ultimate guide for almost every hero in the game, but I'm going to leave it up to you guys on which heroes you guys want me to do next. So for right now, I'm thinking for the next hero, it's going to be either like a soldier, a widow, something like that. So I'd like to know what you guys want down in the comments, because I can do almost any character in the game. Now there's going to be a few I'm going to have to practice more and really work with, you know, some of the newer characters like Ramatra, you know, stuff like that, Junker Queen. I'm not too good with the tanks, but if you guys want a video on tanks, I'll definitely grind out a tank, you know, get really good at it, and I can definitely get you guys a video out for that. But with that, thank you guys for watching till the end of the video. I appreciate everyone, and have a great day.